What's up, Starshines? Sylvia-Moonbeam here with episode 4 of my D&D character, the series where I talk about a D&D or Pathfinder character that I have created. I talk about their inspirations, a rough build outline, and just for fun, talk about what kind of magic deck they would play and what kind of Pokemon they might use. Today's topic is my character, Elyssa Larrikin, so let's dive in. So before we get too far into today's video, I want to make something kind of clear. My character, Elyssa, was in fact inspired by Jester from Critical Role. Both characters are blue-skinned tieflings who are originally trickery and illusion-themed clerics. They both enjoy painting and have a maternal figure who is a red tiefling. However, Elyssa ended up evolving into a character all of her own, and I can nowadays say with much more confidence that I would no longer consider her a Captain Ersatz. It would now instead just kind of consider her a loose Expy at best. The funny thing is, I never watched Critical Role until I made Elyssa. Campaign 2 started in January of 2018, but I hadn't watched any of it since at the time I was running a Pathfinder campaign of my own, and I wasn't really too interested in what 5e had to offer. While writing chapters for my story Fae, however, I wanted to make a character that'd be a good foil to the characters I've already talked about in previous episodes. Unlike Ka'a or Saval, I wanted Elyssa to be kind of an inexperienced spellcaster, and that she could essentially be mentored by Ka'a and Saval in my story. Also, Vayreni's changeling sisters were all going insane and being corrupted before becoming part of the Hag Coven, and meanwhile Elyssa had recently lost her only family member, her sister, before joining the group. So she'd be very much kind of like the kid sister of the party, one that Vayreni would have to learn to accept as opposed to just assuming the worst. Come December of 2018, when I was writing Fae, I began to see a lot of fan art of Jester, which of course makes sense, Critical Role is huge. And I wanted to make a tiefling for a while, so as one would expect, Critical Role's Jester inspired my own tiefling. However, this kind of changed a little bit when I ended up discovering an artist named Xeon in a Tree. They had a blue Draenei character from World of Warcraft that made me consider having the older tiefling character, and I wanted mine to be kind of cute and innocent looking as well, which was the ultimate decision that made Elyssa into a teenager and kind of more that little sister role. Elyssa Larrikin was originally designed as a straight-up rip-off of Jester, but designed for Pathfinder instead of D&D 5e. As a Pathfinder tiefling, Elyssa received dexterity and intelligence bonuses in exchange for lower charisma. Fiendish resistance also cut flat damage off of cold, fire, and electric damage to help kind of make her a little tanky, with some medium or light armor and a shield of faith as a cleric. You might also notice that tieflings gain a use of darkness as a spell-like feature, but thanks to Pathfinder's alternative traits, I ended up swapping that out with one of my favorite abilities, Prehensile Tail. While you can't wield a weapon with your tail, you can turn grabbing items, such as weapons and artifacts from your bag, into a swift action, greatly saving you time in the action economy. As Pathfinder, Elyssa was originally a cleric, and Pathfinder clerics get 2 domains, I chose the Trickery domain for obvious reasons, including the Copycat feature, which acts similarly to D&D's Evoke Duplicity, and the Imagination domain. Imagination is a subdomain of the Luck domain. The Luck domain is mostly changed by its subdomain, but we still do get an awesome ability from Luck called Bit of Luck. This allows us to grant advantage to allies whenever they make multiple d20 rolls their next turn. So this would be really good to put on a gunslinger, or a ranger, or a fighter, or a monk, characters who get multiple attacks per turn. Imagination, however, is an awesome domain, granting us several illusion magics, and even letting us use the Fascinated condition, which works similarly to charming someone. In Dungeons & Dragons, however, it was a lot easier, since we know how Laura Bailey plays Jester. In D&D 5e, tieflings receive resistance to fire damage and get a +2 to charisma, but As she is a bloodline of Asmodeus tiefling, Jester also gained a +1 to intelligence and access to thaumaturgy, hellish rebuke, and our old friend from Pathfinder, darkness. I could tell you extensively about the trickery domain of Cleric, but if you are a Critical Role fan already, you know what Jester can do. That being said, I didn't want her to be a straight-up ripoff of Jester. I wanted her to be her own character. And here is where we reach a schism. As I mentioned before, Elyssa evolved outwards from her initial idea. See, originally I had it planned that Elyssa's patron, her god, so to speak, was her sister. Growing up on the street together, Elyssa and her older sister, Britannia, or Britty for short, had to survive as best they could. Britty taught Elyssa how to read tarot cards in exchange for coin, and taught her how to paint as their mother had taught Britty. Beautiful murals covered every major building in town, and the two sisters were able to afford the meager shelter and minimal food they needed to survive. However, when Britty came of age, the hyper-religious town that they grew up in feared what an adult tiefling could do. They feared that a tiefling would corrupt them all, and so Britty was hung for the crime of simply being an adult tiefling. With her only living family member dead, Elyssa packed up her cards and her paints and headed off to the local port town to look for work and to be safer from these religious zealots. Britty left behind her mother's paintbrush, and years and love of devotion from their mother and Britty had both imbued the brush with magic. Whenever Elyssa holds her brush, she can wield that magic, and she can hear her sister's guidance, her mother singing. That is her power. So obviously D&D doesn't really have anything like that, so I instead had to go with what I thought made the most sense. No longer a copy of Jester, Elyssa was her own character now. While she was still a tiefling, I instead gave Elyssa the Glazia bloodline, which instead grants her +1 to dexterity instead of intelligence. It also grants her minor illusion, disguise self, and invisibility. This will be important because Elyssa is no longer a trickery domain cleric. Instead, she is now a bard, relying on her showmanship and craftsmanship to read cards and paint, rather than religious faith. Though her starting gear is a bit different than most characters, as the only gear I canonically stated in my story that she has, besides some food and her bedroll, is her tarot cards, homemade paints, and her magical paintbrush. So, for a subclass, I thought the best thing to give Elyssa would be College of Spirits. At level 3, she gains the ability to contact spirits through her tarot cards, and I like to think of this as Britty's voice, reminding her the meanings of her cards. The Tales from Beyond ability is really flavorful and allows Elyssa to spend bardic inspiration to read cards based on what she rolled. I like to imagine it that her inspiration die grows as she's learning to read her cards better, hence why Tales from Beyond grants stronger powers. She's able to read the cards better and give better readings. I would argue that any spell that requires somatic components or a focus could have her use her brush, her paintbrush. But check with your DM first if you wanted to try something similar. If they don't allow it, you could argue that her brush is her bardic instrument for art. And if they won't allow it, not gonna lie, your DM is lame. Honestly, I would much rather go with something flavorful than go with something that is hard and fast to the rules. And of course, the hour-long ritual that comes with Spirit Session, a later ability, of course, that's painting. And creatures you're conducting the ritual with are going to be watching you paint live, kind of like Bob Ross, but with a tiefling. Elyssa Larrikin is a character I'm really proud of to watch how she's changed and evolved over time. So of course, since she reads cards, it would make sense that she would have her own magic deck, though making one for her is difficult. As a passionate caster who is able to conjure illusions and see the future, a red-blue deck makes the most sense to me, though I can't recommend any highly powerful cards. Elyssa is not a very skilled caster, and also there's actually really few cards that fit her themes. For example, Chandra, Novice Pyromancer, can reflect how she's still learning her magical craft. Painter's Servant is a fun card with a lot of flavor for her, and I think it's the only mythic I list here. So is Saheeli's artistry, representing how Elyssa's paintings are amazing quality of her age. Meanwhile, 2 Feet, Imaginary Friend, Phantom Monster, and Archetype of Imagination can all represent the painted spells and illusions. Jace's Projection, Spark Double, and Illusory Angel can all represent Brittany herself. And Burning Prophet, Augury Owl, and Reversal of Fortune can all represent her ability to read cards to read the future via College of Spirits. Like I said, it's not a really great deck. Honestly, I would challenge you to be able to try to win a game using cards from this deck. It probably won't go very well, but I did my best. I did research what cards could be the most flavorful for her. If Elyssa was a Pokemon trainer instead, I actually have 2 different sets for her. As an artist trainer, Elyssa would of course have Smeargle, she could have a Zoroark to represent her illusion magic, and Mimikyu. Mimikyu has this raggedy appearance to kind of resemble the tattered clothes she wore while living on the street, and Mimikyu's stick, or tail, is kind of similar to her brush. On the flip side, as a Hex Maniac, Elyssa could have a Gothitelle for her future sight abilities. Gardevoir could act as Brittany, because Gardevoir is described as being like a guardian angel, and again, Alolan Marowak could represent Brittany, both being kind of ghostly, but also represent Elyssa's performances of performing painting and reading spirits as opposed to dancing or singing. The Flaming Bone of Alolan Marowak can kind of be like her magical paintbrush. Obviously, you could run both of these teams of 3 together, or you can mix and match them, depending on your tastes, but those are Pokemon I think would probably work the best with Elyssa. So, what do you think of Elyssa Larrikin? Let me know down below. Don't forget to Lunar Laser like, Starshine subscribe, and hit the Moonbeam bell if you want to see more content like this. And until next time, I have been Sylvia-Moonbeam, and thanks for watching everyone. Peace out.